peers at the University of Windsor and our peers at universities, hundreds of universities across the world, have taken a principled stance against the complicity and the silence of our public institutions, and against the use of their tuition and tax money to enable a genocide against Palestinians.
That's what it sounded like just a few weeks ago at the convocation ceremony for the University of Windsor's law school. The valedictorian devoted part of her speech to the situation in the Middle East.
Let us remember that from Wawiyatanong to Gaza, none of us are free until all of us are free.
She got loud applause, and it was tough for Sydney Greenspoon to sit in that hall that day and to listen to it. Greenspoon is the outgoing head of the Jewish Law Students Association at the Windsor campus, all 35 members, and she was also waiting to walk across the stage and receive her law diploma. She was nervous because so many of her classmates were wearing keffiyehs or Palestinian flags over their gowns. And it's been that kind of tense atmosphere in her final semesters since October 7th. Greenspoon says she and her Jewish classmates who are pro-Israel have been harassed and insulted, called baby murderers by pro-Palestinian student club members. She was personally threatened with attacks. A law professor told a student he didn't want any Zionists attending his lectures, and there's so much more, which is why Greenspoon wasn't surprised when she saw the terms of the deal which her university reached on July 11th with the pro-Palestinian tent encampment group in exchange for the 2-month-old tent city to come down peacefully. The university adopted what the protesters and Jewish groups alike are calling the strongest pro-Palestinian encampment victory in Canada to date. It includes a boycott of Israeli universities, hiring more Palestinian professors from Gaza and the West Bank, calling the bombing of Palestinian schools scholasticide, and when it comes to the school's investments, making sure these follow the UN and the International Court of Justice's views, which have condemned Israel for violating all sorts of human rights and international law in how it's illegally occupying Palestinian territory, unquote.
This is like the nail in the coffin of like what Windsor, the precedent setting that no Jews will ever want to come to the school. And it's not a place for Jews anymore.
I'm Ellen Besner, and this is what Jewish Canada sounds like for Tuesday, July the 16th, 2024. Welcome to the CJN Daily, a podcast of the Canadian Jewish News. Unlike many other Canadian universities near bigger Jewish communities, there is no Hillel at Windsor, no Chabad house. Maybe 100 Jewish students are enrolled out of a student body of 17,000. And Statistics Canada says the Muslim population of the area has nearly doubled in the past 10 years, from 4% to nearly 8% of the population, or about 18,000 residents. Arabic is the second most popular language in Windsor after English, according to a 2017 government report. In contrast, about 1,500 Jews live in the Windsor area, and that's down by half from what the community used to number in its heyday, which is about 0.2% of the population. So why tell you all of this? Because the Jewish Federation president and community leader Stephen Cheifetz thinks it explains partly why the deal was signed. He joins me now with recent law school graduate Sydney Greenspoon to talk about the contents of the deal, what life has been like on campus, and his battle plan. Well, it's good to meet you on this occasion. We're speaking in the aftermath of the agreement from July 11th between the University of Windsor and actually there's two agreements, right, which many people probably don't know, between the University of Windsor Students Association as well as the encampment people.
Right.
Why do you think that of all the university agreements that have happened so far in Canada with their encampment people, where it's from Oshawa all the way out, this accommodated the pro-Palestinian protesters so much more than any of the other encampments?
My perspective is two things. Number one, it's a small Jewish community, and I think they thought they could just shove it through with not much of a response. And secondly, the University of Windsor has 4,700 foreign students, most of whom are from the Mideast. And they want to accommodate them because they make a significant amount of money off of those students. So I think both of those reasons are reasons why they did it. It was an easy answer for the president.
And Sydney, did you want to weigh in on this?
I won't lie, I wasn't surprised given like the climate on campus this year. I think that they do a great job of giving a lot of lip service to the Jewish community and saying, this is what we're going to do. We're looking into it. And we were kind of strung along all year, especially by President Rob Gordon, who I've met with now for probably 50 times over the past 3 years of my law school degree. So this, to me, although it felt like a punch in the gut, I wasn't surprised because we've gotten nothing out of the meetings with any of the administration. None of our concerns were ever met or taken seriously. And like true real concerns like threats on campus and all the different things that happened to us that we explicitly brought forward to Rob Gordon were never dealt with. So I wasn't surprised that Rob Gordon allowed this to happen on our campus.
Rob Gordon was allowed, was asked twice to do anti-Semitism training, once by CEJA and once by the Simon Wiesenthal. And both times he
More
said,
than that.
and never didn't do it.
All right, but if you look, and I'm going to put the link for our readers and listeners directly to the agreements, but if you look in the agreements, it now does say mandatory both anti-Semitism training and anti-Palestinian racism, Muslim and Islamophobia training for the executive team.
And they have done nothing to implement those.
No, it was just July 11th.
Yeah.
Well,
So it's like a few days.
On the anti-Semitism training, much before October 7th, when I was meeting with Rob Gordon, we asked for anti-Semitism training. We felt like that was a big issue in the administration. They really didn't understand what we were talking about. We said that if you want it, we can get it tomorrow from Hillel, from Friends of Simon Wiesenthal, from CEJA. And they'd always say, yeah, maybe we'll let you know. And the precedent that this sets is if you build an illegal encampment, then you can get training for your population.
Right.
In the agreements, it talks a lot about they will immediately bring in counseling for BIPOC and for Muslim and Palestinian, any students who are impacted by what's going on in Gaza. They said it slightly differently when it came to the Jewish students' trauma. Can you unpack what that was for our listeners and how you reacted? It
is very different language, and they don't take the Jewish students' concerns as seriously or seriously at all. That's why we're going. I'm going to meet with President Gordon with Scott Goldstein from CEJA on Wednesday to have a very serious conversation, because we're going to explain to President Gordon how serious this situation is, and that he not only has involved the Jewish community of Windsor, but he's involved the Jewish community of Canada. The number of emails I've received from people all over Canada about how sickened they are by this Jew hatred that's come out of the University of Windsor, that's supported by the president and by the DEI vice president, including a bunch of very prominent non-Jewish people who have sent me emails. So we're going to explain the significance of this, and this is the thin edge of the wedge, and we are going to fight back significantly. And he's not used to that because he has not had that pushback from the Windsor Jewish community previously.
We need to explain that for listeners who may not know what it's like there, because they're used to larger Jewish schools where there's schools with larger Jewish students. How many Jewish kids go there? How many faculty are there?
There are no recorded facts and figures from the university to our knowledge, because I did run the only Jewish club on campus, like the Jewish students, the Law Students Association. There are about 30 Jews that we know of in the school, even less professors, many of whom the Jewish professors are not willing to be there for the Jewish students. And the professors who have been supportive, it's been like a secret one email. So a lot of what we have been doing, really it's just the Jewish Federation that's been our support, and Chabad, who's actually not a Chabad on campus. It's just the Chabad for Windsor.
Okay, but so there's 30 in the law school, or 30 all told?
Around 30. There's probably 4 or 5 otherwise. We know of one undergrad. We know of a couple in other graduate programs. And these are Jews who have made themselves known to us. I will assume that a lot of Jews aren't doing that on purpose and don't feel safe. It's a much different environment than being at a school like Western, where I did my undergrad at Western, where there's maybe thousands of Jewish students. It definitely does feel like they're just trying to push us off to the side. For me, it feels very personal with Rob Gordon, because I I've met with him on countless occasions. Every single time something came up on campus, I sent him an email or I was in his office.
Do you believe he's a Jew hater? I've never met him, so I don't know.
I think that I don't believe that. I try to see the best in all people. I do think that he's in a very difficult situation. I think a lot of the presidents of the schools are, but this specific situation, I think, leads me to believe that he no longer has my best interest at heart as a Jewish student. I'm not sure he ever did before. I guess I'm more pessimistic after meeting with him for 3 years. We were told very often, like very serious situations on campus, they would be looking into it. So
what
it's now
situations?
July.
Give us some example, one or two.
Sure.
I know I've read your testimony,
Yeah.
I've heard you speak, but our listeners haven't.
Sure. Very recently, we had a die-in in the law school, which is when people lie on the ground to simulate death, I guess. And that's not allowed in the law school. You can't bring a blowhorn into the law school to interrupt classes where no professors could teach for 20 minutes. We were told they'd be looking into it. There was another situation, that was in January, so it's now July. We were also told that when we were threatened, when sitting out at a Jewish booth for the Jewish club, somebody was threatening us and called us baby murderers and said the blood of 30,000 is on our hands, and literally said directly, this is a threat to get out, that they are looking into it. And they're still looking into it, I guess, to this day. We were also told that they don't have the resources to deal with the immense amount of anti-Semitism complaints, but particularly when it comes to the BDS campaign, to the boycott, divest, and sanction campaign. It was also passed through our UWS day. I was there for about 6 hours arguing. Right before that meeting,
It's a student association of the University of Windsor.
I was at the meeting. I probably heard more. I've never actually, to this day, heard more gruesome things than I did at that meeting, told to me and my fellow Jewish students. There were about 5 of us in a room of probably 200. But right before that meeting, Rob Gordon assured myself and my co-president that this will have no impact on the university's divestments. No worries. Like, even if they try to do this, it really will have no impact. So we were completely lied to, end of the day. We were told they would never change their investments, that the boycott couldn't affect kosher food on campus, which it does, because
How? They just said they're going to allow more.
Yeah, so they, according to the UWSA agreement that was passed a couple months prior, to bring kosher food on campus, they need to find a non-Zionist kosher caterer. So when I asked what metric we would be using to decide what makes a kosher caterer Zionist enough, they wrote that down as a note. They're going to start looking for non-Zionist kosher caterers. And spoiler alert, there are no kosher caterers in Windsor. So I'm not even sure what sort of metric. I think that's a lot of the issue on our campus, is they refuse to define anti-Semitism. We've begged and begged them to define it as something, because if you don't have a definition, you can't deal with it.
You graduated when you decided that you were going to rep Israel on stage in a sea of anti-Israel other students who were graduating with keffiyehs and doing their thing. How did you plan that? Tell me about the thought process behind why you decided to do that.
My co-president and I were very worried about graduation. We saw what was going on in the US at graduations, and actually sent an email to Rob Gordon letting him know we were very concerned that our graduation was going to be overrun by anti-Israel talks and making the Jewish students feel uncomfortable. Like, I was almost embarrassed to bring my parents to see this. Rob Gordon said he basically can't control what happens at our grad and didn't even show up. He actually put in a replacement where usually the president of the school comes and shakes your hand. He was not there. I actually wasn't planning per se to bring the Israeli flag on stage. It was when I almost brought it as like an emergency in case something happened, and the in case did happen. About, I would say 50% of my graduating class was in a keffiyeh. And prior to the graduation, I was basically being taunted by them. I was wearing my bring them home dog tag, my yellow ribbon for the hostages, and an Israeli flag ping, along with most of the Jewish students. They were kind of going up to me and being like, have a great day. And when I was sitting in the audience, our valedictorian went on for about 20 minutes about the genocide in Gaza, specifically making other people feel very uncomfortable. This was not a Palestinian student. This was not the time to talk about world politics. It was all of our collective graduation, and it was completely ruined. And I think that was the moment where I said, like, I need to bring out the Israeli flag. And I will say, like, it was very nice after the graduation. A lot of students made a point to come up to me and say, like, good for you, non-Jewish students, for representing your cause.
Okay, we're going to bring Stephen in because first of all, you went to Windsor to go to law school. You taught law school. You taught law there. Are you still teaching there?
No, I'm not.
Is there a reason why?
No, I taught international transactions at University of Detroit for the joint program, and that ended about 4 years ago.
All right, but you do have a scholarship with your late parents and your wife's parents.
Right.
Tell me about how that sits with you, having watched this.
Yeah, I'm going to go to the dean and I'm going to request that if I could have the money back, I'd like to have the money back, but that's not possible. So I'm going to change the name to a blank scholarship because I think that both my father, Oliver Sholem, and my father-in-law, Oliver Sholem, would be rolling in their graves if they knew that the money that I donated on their behalf is being used by a law school that's it's so there's so much Jew hatred that emanates from there. I'm also going on our firm website, and I'm going to say that I am too embarrassed to name the law school and the undergrad school I went to. So I will no longer acknowledge that I come from a Jew-hating law school.
Can the Jewish community do anything? You guys are lawyers. So is there a thought when you meet with CJ to have an injunction to try to sue them for this? I mean, this is what you do. So what are you thinking?
Well, I don't do that. I'm a corporate lawyer, but
you're lawyers.
Yeah, lawyers. And we have some of the best litigation lawyers in Canada, Harvey Strasberg, Bill Sasso, et cetera. We're giving Rob Gordon the chance to meet with us and to try and come up with a solution that allows to deal with this issue that he has created. If he will not come up, if he will not agree to a solution, then we're going to look at all options, including litigation. And we've had great support from the Toronto Jewish community, especially Toronto lawyers who grew up in Windsor or went to University of Windsor Law School. There's a very senior level of lawyers who are meeting together in Toronto, coming up with strategies how to deal with this. And the Rob Gordon thinks that it's just easy because it's a small Jewish community and a small Jewish population on campus, but he doesn't understand that now he's crossed the line. And as he crossed the line, he opens up Pandora's box. And what happens to both him and the university after he opens Pandora's box is going to be significant because there is going to be a huge pushback, nothing like he's ever seen before.
Let's quickly, before we end, go look at the agreement. They say, sorry, the university is going they've recruited a Jewish student support advisor earlier in the spring.
They have not.
It's literally on their website.
I know, and it hasn't happened.
Okay. What do you think about this, that they're actually putting this language there?
He actually sent out an agreement to someone and never had it signed.
What do you mean he sent out an agreement to someone? You mean to they recruited an employee and they never followed up with having signed, or this is something
they talked to someone about becoming the liaison for the Jewish students, and then they never signed it nor followed through. He makes promises all the time and never follows through on any of them with respect to the Jewish community. Now, with respect to the Palestinian protesters, well, if he signed the agreement, we'll see if he follows through. But if he doesn't, he signed an agreement that gave them everything they wanted. I think the only thing that wasn't mentioned was using Sharia law as the law of the university.
Okay. All right.
But
I know you're saying that out of frustration.
Yeah.
But I want to ask you. You did say, and I want to make sure I get this right.
Yeah.
No Jewish students or president or faculty or anyone was consulted or had any input into this deal. Correct?
That I'm aware of. They called Rabbi Galpern, who's the Chabad rabbi, after it was signed, and they went over it with him. He said, "This is ridiculous. I'm not going over this with you. You've already signed it."
They wanted his smicha blessing.
Exactly. And he said, "No way."
I want to finish off by asking, in many places in the States and now in Canada, I know that when signatories to the Toronto Metropolitan University Law School letter try to get articling positions, there are some firms that are saying no because you signed the letter. In your opinions, is that the right or appropriate consequence for students coming out of this university?
Well, for me, I'm going into my articling. I'm just about to begin, and I definitely do feel very safe at the firm that I'm working at. I'm very, very fortunate to be where I am. And I think I'd feel very unsafe with some of these students articling with me. A lot of it for me, I think, is it's a misconstruction of the law as well. It's the way that they're diluting the law and the Canadian law. And I've already gotten blamed a lot for these students losing jobs. They made an entire account on Instagram about me and how I've made it so they can't get jobs. So I don't want to speak too much on it in the sense of that I've never done that. But I think that for especially private law firms, they have their values, and what was signed in that TMU letter completely goes against their values. And I know if I always try to think about things in the reverse. If this was a pro-Israel group and we signed something horrific that said like all Palestinians deserve what happened on October 7th to them, that's bad. Like, I think it's like you need to keep your moral compass aligned. And like, for me, I know that's bad, and I would never have signed something like that. And I think that students need to be more careful, especially in law, when we should know better, instead of signing on that all resistance is justified, which means rape. I was at the Nova site yesterday and I saw it with my own eyes, and it only made me more angry at what's going on our campus as I'm looking at the faces of 364 people who were murdered and raped at a music festival. And that's what they're justifying. So that does make me uncomfortable as a Jewish student and a Zionist student. So I don't blame law firms for being upset, but it goes against their mandates and their values. And it should go against the schools, but that's not here nor there.
We've looked for our English students, and we wouldn't consider anybody who was the pro-Palestinian, especially when we see the comments that are made. It is ludicrous. It's also against the rules of the Law Society. When you can make comments like that, as a law student, you're a future member of the Law Society, and you're not allowed to make those comments. And so, from our perspective, we want to make sure that the people we hire understand the consequences of what they do. And these students obviously don't understand consequences. Using the masks, etc. Wait a minute, if you believe in something, why are you wearing a mask? Because it may harm your future job. Well, if you believe this, why do you care? You wouldn't want to work at a place that didn't support your views. That's the opposite side of it.
I ask because the University of Toronto judgment, the judge said, they're just innocent, idealistic university students. And so there shouldn't be any consequences, which there aren't anywhere. But I remember being the daughter and granddaughter of like lawyers and judges, Jewish lawyers in history, who couldn't find positions and had to find their own firms. They had to make their own firms because nobody would hire Jews back in the day. So having had that happen to us, I put that out there to see what you thought about this at the same time. How do you hold both? You know what I mean?
The judgment on the TMU letter too, it's a lot about how they didn't really know. And that's another whole thing in law. Ignorance of the law is no excuse, especially as a lawyer.
And just to bring that full forward, University of Windsor Law School hired the principal guy behind the TMU letter as a tenured professor.
Anything that you think we didn't ask that you want our listeners to understand about what can happen next and going forward?
There's no place for this in Canada. We're a country of people that come before, and there should be no persecution. That should all be left from wherever people came from. The fact that these students think that they, a lot of them, it's social. We're out hanging with their buddies, having fun, but they don't understand that their fun is at someone else's expense, and we're going to deal with that.
Yeah, I think for me, it just feels almost like a punch in the gut at the end of after everything I went through for the last year on campus and the last 3 years at Windsor. The agreement is completely against the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition of anti-Semitism. It holds Israel to a crazy double standard and indirectly Zionist and Jewish students. And it sends a message to students on campus that everything they did this year, including say that all their events are explicitly anti-Zionist, is completely okay. And I think that that's what upsets the students, is that we have been like begging for some sort of support this year. And we've been basically left to our own devices and trying to figure it out on our own, even though it's like a literally impossible situation for students to do on our own. And it's a place where they actually bring in the professors who are the most anti-Semitic, and that's who they're attracting. Anti-Semitic professors, anti-Semitic students, and people who disregard Jewish life and Jewish death, especially the disregard of the October 7th massacre. I think that I wouldn't be surprised soon if they said that Jews are boycotted from campus, because that's just the path Windsor is going down. And I hope that Rob Gordon, after speaking to me for maybe 50 times, will have some sort of understanding of why we're so upset.
Good
luck with that. I'm going to thank both of you for sharing your experiences. We'll keep on top of this story. We'll check back with you and see what happens after your meeting. Thank you, Sydney, and thank you, Stephen, for being on the CJN Daily.
Thank you very much.